So welcome to CIS-27B. My name is Casey Nguyen. I've been working here for 8 years, going on 8 years, I think, just started in January 2018. I have a PhD in information assurance, which is cybersecurity. 6 months before my doctorate program, and it took me six years to get that, right? Working full time. And then prior to that, I have a master in science in cybersecurity as well. And so before that, I was working mostly in IT. I was an admin in networking and system admin for a while. Before that, I was a network analyst and field technician. And right now I do some consulting outside of work here. I have some clients that work with me on like policies, how to look at, and so I do a lot of audits, mostly in healthcare. And so I usually work with their directors and their team to kind of look at solutions. Some of them kind of outsource, but so I work with that kind of team. So right now, outside of teaching, that's what I mainly do. And so for this class, we are going to be focusing on hands-on technique. I'm going to give you a lot of the tools and the resources. So some of you want to get into purple team or red teams. And in cybersecurity, you must know how to do pen testing. Okay. Doesn't matter which position that you're going to get into, whether you're going to do incident response, right? Whether you're going to be an analyst. So at least a basic skill. So I want you to have to take away from this class. Most of my classes are going to be hands-on. And so it's going to be very different if you've been taking online class. I use virtual machines because virtual machines is in the world of security, right? So I'll teach you how to use virtual machine if you haven't used it before, and be able to implement open source tool. And security is really about how resourceful you are. Sometimes you have to think outside of the box and troubleshoot. Pen testing, forensic, and a lot of the things in security requires patience, right? Sometimes when you do pen testing, you move 3 steps and then you get your results and you're like, wait, I don't have what I need. So you have to start all over again. And that's normal. So what I ask of you in this class is to be patient with the lab, right? Sometimes if you have questions, I'm here to help you. And my goal is to get your assignments complete so that way you have access to me. I also, on Monday and Wednesday, I come into this room an hour before I start to hold office hours. So students, sometimes they pop in to make up their lab, to ask questions. If you have questions about the field, I'm also here. You can also reach me via email. So right now, we're going to go over the syllabus real quick. And at the top, you would see, and this is posted on Canvas already, it talks about the course objective and the description. Basically, you are going to use the tools and the techniques and the principle in security, some of the methodology, and how to be ethical in what you do. In our world, you have privilege to a lot of very sensitive information. So the difference between a person that is attacking, right, for their own benefit, or compared to a pen tester or an ethical hacker is the practice, okay? And we will differentiate that as we go. So what I'll do is I'll bring you from the beginning steps. We're gonna do some recon, right? There will be times that we are gonna have our own server and attack it. And so that way you will see all the process and the type of technique that we're gonna use, okay? This course is going to be hybrid, so you're required to be here every Thursday. And so that way you can go over the lecture with me. And I will have my recording available after the session. So tonight or tomorrow, it will be posted and linked to Canvas. It's also on YouTube. So that way you have access to it, so you can always go back and watch it. And all my assignments is provided via learning management system, Canvas. So you have access to that. I typically keep the assignments open for the month. So if, let's say that you missed on Sunday, you got busy and you did turn in and you turn in on Monday, I don't usually penalize students that turn in a couple of days late. But if it's 2 weeks late, then we'll talk about the late policy and the points, just to be fair to everybody that turned in work on time. Okay? So what is this course about? So first, we're going to talk about the roles of attackers, right? And how that is different to our world. Some company, they will hire you just specifically as a pen tester. Pen testers tend to travel a lot. You're required to have limited time to be able to see, right? They might say that you need to assess our network. You have 48 hours to do so, right? Sometimes if you are in the SOC or the Security Operations Center, you might be a specialist or an analyst. You might have to do some pen testing so that way you can look at how the security solutions can be implemented to improve your network and your systems. So there's different areas. Sometimes they call you a risk analyst, right? Or a threat analyst, which requires you to do pen testing, forensic, and other things. So we're gonna look at methodologies and models on how attack happens. And when you're facing attack, which is very often, it happens all the time, right? You will see that on attack maps, and I can show you that. What you will see is you have to understand like how they got into your network and your systems and how to stop it, right? So the companies pay a lot of money for your knowledge and skills. We'll talk about ethical standards. That's a really important area, right? My advice for you is don't do anything until there's things in writing, it's been reviewed, and both parties signed with the witness. Because the legality of this, somebody might ask you to do something without actual written agreement, and it might come back to you and you can get sued. So you just have to be really careful about the things that you're going to be performing. Okay. One big area about cybersecurity is you have to be strong in networking, right? So if you have taken CIS-40A or Cisco courses at RCC, I encourage you to keep practicing and understanding the network because everything stems back to the network. And when you are doing pen testing, sometimes when you do blind testing, they don't tell you how many servers, what kind of system, how many routers, switches, any configuration, you have to find your way there, right? And so you have to really logically think about how would the network set up. You have to investigate, and that's part of recon. So having network knowledge is important in the world of cybersecurity. So we'll touch on TCP/IP model and OSI model, okay? And how each layer is correlate to attack. It's different than the networking class. In the networking class, we talk about protocols, right? The resources, what's happening with the traffic at each layer. In this class, we're going to talk about the attack level from the physical layer all the way to the application layer. So it's going to be applying your networking concept related to attack methodology. Okay. Then we'll get into encryption. Last night I was teaching 41A. Some of you are in it. I see you're here, right? And we talked about confidentiality and encryption. And I had them use like a CC guess tool to be able to guess the key for the encryption, right? Many students raised their hand and they said, well, it takes 10 minutes so far and it's not guessing my key, right? And I said there's two factors that played into, brute forcing your key. One, what kind of resources you have, processor, right? RAM, because your system use that to be able to run the tools. Two, how good is the tool, the algorithm for the tool? So sometimes it will be hours before you can guess, right? Or it will be able to enumerate the keys. So we'll talk about algorithm, right? Because there are good tools and there are not good tools. And in this world, you have to equip yourself with many tools, okay? And know how to use them. Okay, so we'll talk about different type of encryption, like symmetric, asymmetric. This you probably have learned in CIS-27. We'll talk about PKI, which is public key infrastructure. We'll talk about the importance of hashing, especially how it relates to integrity. So in the event of the attack, sometimes that you have to find out like which files were taken, right? Because when you hear data leak, they would say, oh, there's like 10,000 records that are leaked. Which files have been modified, and hashing plays a very important role in that. Okay. And then we'll get into the physical security. Yes, this is super important, right? I told my class last night and also the networking class last semester. The easiest part to cut a network is to cut the cable, okay? So if the cable is exposed, right? Years ago, I remember that there were outages across the country for 24 hours. Somebody gone down to the manhole and cut all the main line for Cox. You know, Cox Network owned the majority, right? Some of you have Cox as a service provider of the United States, okay? So when they cut that, right, other companies are affiliated with Cox, so everybody had outages, right? So we got to think about like the design, how exposed we are physically, and then we have to really look at the access control. So how did they get to the manhole in the first place, right? Who gives them the access? And then today we're going to do footprinting. So we're going to talk about footprinting compared to fingerprinting, the terminology that you must know as a pen tester, an ethical hacker, the techniques that you would use in that, right? And then we would explore the tools and looking at exploitation techniques, how a vulnerability can play an important role in the exploitation process, and the type of kits that you can use to exploit. And then the important part for the pen tester and the ethical hacker is to be able to derive, right, an answer, right, to solve. Because if you have a network that has a hole in it, you need to cover it, right? You need to make sure that things don't happen to your system, making sure that it's available. Your data is not jeopardized because your system is assets, people are assets, and data are assets. Okay, we'll do some port scanning. We will also look at like scanners and tools. So some of the common one that you guys probably have seen or used is Wireshark. I encourage you to know Wireshark very well, right? Like I said before, networking is important. But we will also use things like Nmap. You probably heard of Nmap before, right? It's a really good tool for vulnerability assessment. It gives you operating system information, which is what's called fingerprinting, like version number, right? Why do we care about that? Well, version number tells you about the vulnerability of the software, if it's been patched. And then also it's going to map out like where's your target, how far you are from that target. Because in attacks, a lot of the time, if you're looking at the perspective of the attacker, what happens is they have a chosen target or targets, right? And they would spend a lot of time learning about those targets, whether it's people, system, or network, right? So the more homework you do, the better, the faster you're gonna be, right? Nobody goes and rob the bank, right, without knowing the layout of the bank. Likely that they're gonna get caught, right? So from an attacker standpoint, that's what happens. So in our world, right, we get paid to enter a network, look at the issues with the systems on that network, write up a report, and get paid. Okay, that's the world of pen tester. So the tools that you use, the analysis of the results is what pays the bucks. Okay, so also writing the report, right? I have former students that came back to tell me they're risk engineers, threat engineers now. They started when I started here, right? And they tell me, tell your students to learn how to write professional reports, right? Write professional emails. So brush up on those things. And now you have access to AI, so it can touch up for you. Okay. We'll talk about rootkits, malware, enumeration process, doing some password cracking, um, things like that. Like I said, a lot of people say, oh, it's easy. I'll just use the tool and run the tool. Well, you have to use a powerful system, right? If you are remotely connecting, you have to have good connection, stable connection. In some cases, you have to be stealth, right? And it takes a lot of things that's involved in that. Okay, so be patient. We're gonna have a lab on wireless, where I will put up routers. Those routers are not connected to the network because we don't want to get in trouble, right? And then you are going to see if you can break the the key to those routers, right? I mean, aircraft NG is only as good as it is, right? The software you use is gonna have some limitations, so you can use other options. And then we'll take a look at wireless. So in my opinion, um, wireless is probably the most weak area in the network if they don't protect it. It's the fastest way so someone can sit in the car, right? They can have a power bank, the laptop, and they can scan on the wireless. This is why they tell you not to use public Wi-Fi, because I can attach to the public Wi-Fi, run Wireshark, and I can see everything that comes through on your system, right? As soon if you download something, pay your bill, right? I see that as payload. So interpreting that, and then you can also do like packet stuffing. There's a lot of different things that you can do with wireless. So wireless is an important area that we need to look at where threats come in. Okay. We're gonna spend a couple of weeks on web and data, 1 week on database attack. So I'm gonna teach you a little bit about SQL injection. So take SQL, okay? CIS-61, CIS-62. I know those classes might not be in your scope for your certificate, but you will benefit in the long run, okay? Take programming classes, especially Python. I saw some of you in my class before, right? Because you will script, okay? So we will do web. The reason why I focus a lot on web, you're gonna see some of that in the lab, is because everybody runs web apps. Everybody, okay? You go to pay your water bill, it's a web app, right? A bank account, it's a web app. So you see a lot of that, and web servers are abundant. We don't go attack public web server, okay, unless they give you the authority to do that. We will set up our own, and then we'll run that. This semester, I think I'm gonna do a little bit. So I got a cool data set that I wanted to test. And I wanted to kind of touch with AI and deepfake. So that's apparent right now. So like you've seen people sampling voices and then be able to create that. So and then also images too. So we can see how they use that for phishing. We will have also a phishing lab. And then we'll get into malware. And malware can be vast, okay? So if you want to get into this area, like work for a malware company, great. Malware is always evolving. Only 60% of malware is known in the internet, right? It's always changing. So we want to kind of understand like the structure of it. Sometimes, a lot of the time, you're gonna have to reverse engineer with malware. So no coding like C, C++, Java, etc. And even I was advised by my former student, assembly language, right? Low level language. They like to write malware in low level language. Okay. We talked about Wireshark. That's part of the sniffer or network analyzer. We'll touch on session hijack. We'll use some tool like Zap and other things. And then we'll do a lab on denial of service attack. My students always say, well, I attacked my own server and it's still up, right? Denial of service is all about resources. So if you deplete the resources, then you can take it down. So if the server has enough RAM and processor, now what you see is their data center, they have failover clusters, to be able to avoid single point failure. So sometimes, it takes patience and time, but, you can slow somebody down if you keep launching. And this is why when you see like distributed denial of service attack is more powerful because you have many systems targeting that. You just have more resources. Okay. Linux is the world that you live in, right? I know there's Windows tool, but in pen testing, you have to be comfortable with Linux, right? Kali is what the preferred choice because it's easy for beginner. But you can use Parrot, etc. I know some of you might be practicing on Hack the Box already or other websites. I encourage you to do that and go for competition. That's going to help you with jobs. Okay. I coach NCL sometimes, but I don't regularly do it. I know Skip and RCC, he does it. So you can sign up. It's $35 for National Cyber League. I encourage you to do so. We'll talk about social engineering, how to look at like I touched on before, phishing. Phishing really plays on social engineer very well. They are very crafty about phishing techniques now. So we'll look at some phishing tool, and you can use that as a pen tester. Why? To see how many people in your company actually give up their password, right? And then train them not to do it again. So you can assess it for that purpose. Okay. And then how to handle incidents, because sometimes you would need to be able to respond to issues. And then looking at different areas with different industries like healthcare, finance, etc. We'll do some honeypot and honeynet exercise and then utilizing the firewall. There's one lab that you're gonna set up the firewall and you're gonna see if you can take it down. Firewall is used everywhere, right? It's a way that we can stop people from coming in. It's protecting the network. It's protecting the system. So as a pen tester, sometimes you want to see how weak is that firewall? How strong is that firewall, right? Is it effective? Are the rules set effective for the company? So we'll do a lab so you can see. Any question? Sorry, I'm very excited about this class. So, all right. So here is your learning outcome. You should be able to use tools and methods and be able to utilize that to understand how a computer and a network can be jeopardized. You will be able to take your information and think about how you can defend your network and your system, and then how you can use the internet, the World Wide Web, and implement solution to be safer, right? That's the whole point as a role in cybersecurity. So recommendation about the knowledge that you should know, networking, system, hardware is important, right? CIS-25 plays a big role, and also, security concept is important. Okay, I don't require a textbook for this class. In the past, I've used different textbooks. They're good and they're not good. So what I do is I pull information from different texts and also resources like this and things like that, to be able to give you your notes that the industry required. And so you won't have to buy a book. Test out for the Practice Pen Test Plus. will be provided for you, I hope, right? I do have licenses enough for this class, I believe. So we will work on that after spring break. I will give you the license via email, and then you just need to activate your license. I only require you to do the practice exam from test out. I really feel that test out is like busy work, but it has useful information. Because if I'm a student and I have to do like 150 modules, I won't remember one module. I have training classes right now and they assign a lot of work, right? So I was like, well, if I'm a student, if I assign this much work, I don't know if I can handle the class. So we will just do that, but you have access to it for the year. So, and I will open my course on test out for the year. So you can always go back, redo some of the labs on test out, learn some of the lessons, watch the videos, right? But I don't require specific modules to be used. Any question? Okay, so when you come to class, we are going to work on our assignment. I do a Q&A session so I can explain to you the concept. You can ask questions. Then after about an hour and a half, you're going to have a break. We're going to start with the lab. So I'll do some demo and help you. Are you here? So I encourage you to come so that way you can get help. If you miss the session, you can come to my office hours. Monday and Wednesday, I'm usually here like around 4 before my 5:20 class. Or if you want to, you can schedule an appointment. Sometime I'm on campus on Friday for meetings and I can stop by here. This room is not utilized too much on Friday. Late assignments, if you turn it in a day or two late, no big deal, right? You got to remember that deadlines in the industry is super important, so try to be punctual and on time. But life happens, sometimes you get sick or have work. If you turn it in a week late, there's 10% deducted from your earned score. 2 weeks late, another 10%, so 20%. 3 weeks late, 30%, right? 70 is a passing grade, right? So can you turn it in after that? Just let me know, right? I'm flexible, but try to do your work on time. I open it for the month so that way you have it available. There is a cutoff before the final exam because what's going to happen if someone didn't do anything the whole semester, they're going to try to turn in like 25 assignments and it's not fair for everybody else, right? So the way I work, I don't mind grading. I really feel that it's fair that there's a cutoff so that way that doesn't happen. We're going to do some class assignment. It's not due by the end of the session. Sorry, I changed this to the end of the week. Practice exam, that's going to be due at the end of the semester and you would have weeks. Preferably, I like to set it up for 6 weeks. So try to do it throughout. Keep doing it until you get better. Do not wait until like 2 hours before it closes to do it. Because you're not going to do well, right? It's going to weigh down your grade. And you're not going to remember the practice exam. So try to do it throughout the end of the semester. We're going to have a few quizzes. I like to do like game review. And if you score high, you rank top, you're going to get a gift card via email. There's only one final exam in this class. That's going to be at the end of the semester. It's going to open during the final week. I'll send a reminder and passcode for that. Yes, it would use lockdown browser. And then I'm sorry if you're using this device that doesn't like lockdown browser. I have a lot of students that told me about that. Like they don't like lockdown browser. There's no camera required for the exam. If you want to come in here and take the test, I will be here during the finals. Sometimes I just come in, right? If students don't come here, I just do my work. But so you will need to install lockdown browser from the exam page. Remember that. Don't go download it from actual website. Click on the exam and download it. Okay. There will be some opportunity with extra credit, like the quiz review game, so that way you can practice, or events that you can go to. So if there's IT security events, I will let you know. And if you go, you can take a selfie and turn it in and tell me what you learned. Those can help if you're at the cusp. I encourage you to do APAC. A lot of students that already got like 99% in the grade. and they do the extra credit. So the only thing I can do is I can give you the extra percent. But extra credit can never exceed 10%. Usually it's like roughly, under that, like 7, 5, it depends. And I will put it in the area that you need. Like if you miss a lab, it will go into that. That takes me a little bit of time at the end, but I will have your grade ready by the due date, which is 5 business days. You will get a badge from my class, and this comes out of my pocket. I don't we're gonna try to get grants to cover it, and it comes from a credible. Some of you took my classes before, so if you successfully complete the class, I will send you information about where you can claim your badge. It's helpful for like the micro credential right now, is if you post it on LinkedIn, so that way recruiters can see you. You can apply for jobs, so that's helpful. Grade breakdown. Quizzes are 10% of your grade. Assignments and participation will have roughly like 13, 14 assignments. That's 35% of your grade. Your lab exercises is going to be 20% of your grade. And then we have a practice exam for Pen Test Plus is 15%. The reason why we chose Pen Test Plus is if you look at the price, Pen Test Plus is less than $500. Have you guys seen CEH certification price? Over $1,100 now. It's Easy Consult is always pricey, right? If you want to go for that exam, great, right? I've known people and my former students that have done well in CEH, and they got good jobs. So maybe that's something that you can save up money for. And so Pen Test Plus is more realistic for the cost. And then the final exam is 20% of your grade. Okay. So there is grievance policy for every college. There's a web page that you can go to, so a student can file a complaint or anything. But if you have issues, just come and talk to me. Right? If I can improve and correct, I would do that. If you have problem with other students, you can come and talk to me. We'll try to resolve it. If need be, I will have academic affairs involved. I do reserve the right to drop student from the class if I don't see them for a long time or if they don't communicate with me. But if you decided to drop the class, make sure you look at the timeline. It does impact your financial aid with a W or an F. So because completion percentage, when you go below 66%, your financial aid might not be available. So just be mindful of that for your overall journey in academic. Okay. And you don't want to be on probation. You have to file a bunch of papers and things like that. All right, behavior issues, not so much with my teaching for over 21 years. I rarely have any kind of incidents, but there would be dismissal or counseling if need be. And then do your own work. I know AI is available. It's useful if you're trying to learn something. But you can use it to help yourself improve. But I really believe in authenticity. So, this class is really about helping you apply your skills and knowledge. So that's gonna help you. So, in the case of cheating, that would result in the 0, and then the second time that happened, it could be dismissal from class. If you need a combination, like extra time for exam, a note taker, a screen reader, make sure you visit ARC, right? I have their webpage linked. I know it's kind of long link. Or you can contact via phone or email. What will happen is when you submit your form, they review it, they will send me a letter, and then I will adjust the accommodation based on that, okay? And don't be afraid to use it. I think that's a really good resource. And then the ways that you can contact me. So my office is at the Makerspace. If you don't know where that is, it's in the Science Technology Building, first floor. When you walk in, you would see the front desk. I'm on the left, next to the wood lab, okay? I'm there sometimes if I don't have class. When you call this number, it goes to my desk phone. The best way to communicate with me, and I check my email regularly, is send me an email or Canvas message. I will respond within 24 hours, but usually hours shortly after. And then here's my office hours. I might add another after this class, but if you can't physically be in the office session, I sometimes, if students, don't have private questions, I would turn on my Zoom so you can also pop into Zoom and ask questions. I found that it's useful for my online students. But or if you want to make an appointment, we can. Any question? No question. All right, let's get started. Okay. So when you access the course, right, the first module have syllabus, my contact information. I also put in some certification information on that page. So if you want to look at that, and then if you want to sign up for apprenticeship, you can also check that out. So what does apprenticeship do for you, right? What can it do for you? They can help you prepare for work and also help you get some kind of entry level. My advice for you is this industry, it's hard to break into when you are new. Okay. I was the same, right? I did the grunt work, I carried printers up five floor and install. I did the IT stuff, right? But that's gonna help you build consistent experience, and you need consistent experience from now, right? If you transfer until you finish university, because when you finish, you're gonna be able to get job quicker. Okay. If you wait, what's gonna happen is you're gonna have a period that you can't get work. So internship and apprenticeship is gonna help you. If they can't help you, you should continue to apply. And even if you do it every summer, it's gonna be useful. Okay. University of Loma Linda Hospital, the IT director, he always tells me, I look for security junior technician or specialist, but when I look at the resume, I wanted to see extracurricular activities. What are you doing, right, to learn? Okay, like competition, like following, newsfeed about security, because they will ask you questions about that on interviews. So be mindful of that. Okay. All right. We are now going to work on Unit 1. So download your assignments and your lab for later today. And the notes. And if you need storage, it's up front, USB. Let me close my syllabus. So if you want to keep resubmitting the assignment, you can, right? Let's say that you didn't get certain answer and you wanted to resubmit, you can do that. Oh. Okay. So to start, we're going to talk about ethical hacking. This class is labeled ethical hacking because the people who wrote it from RCC, originally they really focused on CEH. But the way I teach it is really to that and also a little bit about pen testing, which is similar. We're going to differentiate that. Because like I said, CEH is very expensive, right? So the benefit of this is really learn about the issues or the problem that you have on your system and be able to improve your security landscape. And to start, you really need to do recon. So in reconnaissance state, which is the first step, is to know about all the weaknesses in your system, in your people, in your network. Okay? And you have to take a perspective of an attacker. So if an attacker approach a vulnerability, what can they do with it? Okay. So it's going to take a lot of time, especially when you're dealing with large enterprises, to identify your vulnerabilities and rank them. So in the first question, it asks you, explain why ethical hacking is important in organization. Why do they pay people, right, to look at these issues, or they pay company organization contract to do that? It's because it really allows the organization to see, right, what are the weaknesses and how to fix them. And ultimately, it's really to protect their investment, right? You're gonna see that you have investors in for-profit company, let's say Fortune 500 company. If an attack happened, right, it's gonna be all over the social media, and it's gonna impact the investment for that company. So it's really to protect the assets. What are the assets? Systems, people, data, right? The world that we live in is really concentrated on data. Private data, right? Confidential data, things that could be pertaining to individuals like your employees, or designs that your company has proprietary protection for, right? So let's say that I own an engineering firm and my engineers design products, right? Could be vacuum cleaner, like Dyson, whatever, right? And those designs really uniquely identify and use those designs for profit for my company. So when you're protecting your assets, really, it's about protecting the money, right? The profits for the company. And from that, when you learn about the weaknesses and how to fix those weaknesses, ultimately, the process is to help you improve your security solution. How we can do better, right? That's what security professional is really doing, is to be able to give answers, solve the problem, give answers, so that way we can improve. That's what you get paid for. Any question? So in attacks, what are some of the areas that attacks usually happen? And as we know, right, the web is probably an easy target. That means that someone can launch an attack to your web server. Why is that important? Well, my website might have information for people to buy my product, right? Or service that I can acquire. So if someone launched a denial of service attack on my web server, it will deplete, right? Or it will slow down the connectivity. Then it won't respond to the customer that can potentially access my website. If you think about Amazon, they are mostly an e-commerce company. That's how they started, right? Now they have cloud and other things, even selling cars, but still that's an e-commerce structure. So their big bucks is really coming from their web application. I don't know if you recall, I think not too long ago they have a glitch with the DNS, right? Where things were not responding accordingly. And it became challenging for them, and there's money loss in that. So web application is really abundant and it's often used, so it becomes a common target. Then you have system, like IoT devices, right? Your Google Nest, your surveillance camera. In hospital, they have a lot of Internet of Things to monitor patients' heart or vital, to be able to automate a lot of the things for the nurses and the physicians. And you have smart devices now, smart homes, etc. So systems becomes a target, but it's vast. But when we're looking at an enterprise or an infrastructure, our system consists of like servers, right? Network systems, security appliances, that tends to be the common target. And then you also have endpoint devices, and you have like devices for the user. Okay. Like laptops, desktop, workstations. I talked about the network already. So the network, in my opinion, it really stemmed back on design and configuration, right? There's no perfect design. The way that we look at it, okay, we got a bunch of appliances, we connect them so they communicate, they transport data back and forth and traffic. And with security appliance, we would add them to the network so that way it will protect the resources within. So you have to really look at like the data flow on the network, where it's coming from and where it's going to. That's important, right? So that's an area for the and also like the systems that's used. I got a bunch of email, right? Because I subscribe to a certain vendor. We have Fortinet here, which is like a firewall appliance that we use in class. But I follow them, and recently, like they had such bad vulnerability. They had zero-day attack and other things on their appliances. So sometimes you're gonna have to look at like the appliances that really build out the network, right? That sends back to this because it's a compilation of systems that's connecting, and how the data flows through them. And then part of the network you would see also wireless. Years ago, when I taught IT and security classes, wireless was not that popular. That was decades ago, right? But now everybody has wireless. And wireless is a common target, and everybody has wireless devices. So we'll touch an area that consists of wireless. You know, now the NFC is very popular, right? You go to pay for like your gas, you use those taps, right? So that's near field communication. And you would know that there is things that can be built to read those signals. Okay. Appliances and devices that you can use. So wireless can be spanned to different things. And I'll talk a little bit about Wi-Fi Pineapple, for evil twin attacks and things like that. And then the social engineering, which is common with cyber criminals, I think. As you know, right? Your cloud account is, needs to be re-authenticated. So there's a lot of different things that they can do to send you information and trick you into updating or giving them your password. Okay. Or account social security. Because data means money, right? So I asked my student last night, what's the value of data, right? On average, let's say I go to the dark web trying to buy data. How clean is the data is going to be the price, right? Quality directly impact the cost of your data. So if you ask Google or AI, it's going to tell you it's between $1.30 to about 30 something, right? Cheaper than, maybe fries now when you go to McDonald's. So, so if you're looking at more quality data or more demanded data, they go higher. Okay. So social engineering is really to tap into that, and then tricking using human weakness. And then your physical. And I added that these areas that are used by the attackers, and in this class you have to think like them, right? And perform some techniques like them. And we look at the target and we assess those targets. But the difference between the regular attacker and an ethical hacker is that we want to be able to find the issues and improve from the problem. So that way your assets is protected, and it's going to give you the credibility for the organization. Because nobody wants to deal with like breach, because breach happens, but it's going to change like how they do the business. Any question? So these assignments, you don't have to write verbatim. Sometimes I'm wordy only because I want to be clear. The point is you hear, you see, you type, and you remember, right? Okay, so where can I find this information? You can also refer to the notes and I can tell you the page. Okay, sorry if you're typing, so I'll flip back. So I give you a little bit of statistic here. Okay. Um, they did a study a little bit ago, and you were looking at like what type of motivation that would be for the cyber attack. You will also have like warfare-based type of attacks when we're looking at nation state, when we're looking at like, APT, certain groups that are paid to do that, to attack another nation, right? I attended a CIA session a while ago, and they were talking about like in China, and they have a drone capture picture. They call it an army. I'm pretty sure you probably heard of it, right? Of 14-year-olds that are really groomed, right, for these type of positions. So they're more like looking at grids, right, resources for the nations. So if you transfer to Cal State San Bernardino and you go for, national cybersecurity, that's really an area that you can look at. But if we're looking at enterprises and things like that, the targets tend to become like their objective, the attacker objective. What kind of are they doing it for personal gain? Is it gonna be like fame? Is it gonna be money? Etc. Or is it, like some of the groups like Anonymous, are they doing it just to make a point, like for political purposes, and so on? Okay. So the effort in that, what you would see is that overall, right, there's also loss that's involved. So the areas of attack, you can find that on page 1 in the middle. And now we're going to talk about the phases. So in this class, you're going to go through the phases of attack. Any question? Okay. So in question 3, let me move it up. Sorry. Let's move this up and move this down. It asks you to describe the first phase of pen testing. What techniques are used in this phase and why is it important? In my opinion, this lays the whole ground or the foundation of how you're going to approach, what tools you're going to use, how effective it's going to be, how fast you're going to, you're going to be able to get your results. Okay. So a lot of it has to do with planning, doing the homework, right? Understanding your target. So the first stage is going to be planning and reconnaissance. Short is recon. You need to define the goals. We don't try to go, I'm just going to see, which system is going to respond, right? You're going to look at logically how you're going to go from where you are to the system or the network, right? This is when your technical knowledge is going to be important. So if you're trying to pen test a system, you need to think about like the hardware on that system, the software on that system, who's using that system, what is it connecting to? So those are the questions that you need to ask yourself to lay out a plan. You don't want to run into the bank. Like no robber wants to run into the bank, and there might be security guards right there, right? Kind of like, oh, I want to rob you. No, right? So a logical person is gonna say, these are the goals and here are my targets. Because some targets are harder and some targets are easier. So we would say, okay, first I would start with the wireless side, right? Or sometimes I would start with the users. So you're gonna define the goals. And then based on that, you're gonna say, okay, these are the tools I'm gonna use to achieve my goals. Remember what I said this in many of my classes. Cybersecurity is about selecting the right tools, effectively using them to get the results that you want. So once you get your tools, then you're gonna start thinking about the strategies. Oh, I'm gonna crack these passwords for these accounts, like the CFO. Oh, I'm gonna try to guess the key to the wireless network, right? Now, we're not really defining the steps yet. You're just planning. It's kind of like how you start writing a paper, you kind of put down your thoughts and then kind of outline some of the things that you want to put on your paper. So the planning stage does that. It really tells you how you're going to move forward, right? From the things that you have put down. So after that, you're going to be able to see, you're going to do vulnerability assessment. So in recon, we're going to start with weaknesses. Because the weaknesses is going to tell you, right? Unpatched system, exploitation kits, maybe injections, all of those things. Okay. And I talk about this. So gathering intelligence, very important here. Do your homework, right? So how can I gather intelligence? Easy. Google Dorsey, right? Start with that. So if you need to, if your target is a company, you can find their website. Start with that. Look at the contact information. Look at the resources. What does the internet have on that company? What does the social media have on the people who work for those companies? Because people like to share stuff sometimes, right? Like they just got a contract on something, or they just hired security people. Sometimes you can also look at jobs specifically for security at that company. Why? Because the job is going to list the responsibility, technical responsibility, and it's going to tell you a little bit of the story about the systems that they're using. Okay. So we are going to gather information about the target, the systems, and the networks. And that's part of footprinting. And sometimes, right, you get phone calls. In the movies, you see they go to like parties, talk to people. They come in, so that's a little bit more. So one of my former students, his clients were casinos in this area. And he worked for a firm that does security solution for the casino. So they hired him, but he can't let the employees, the IT people inside know that he's there to audit. Okay. So he tells me that it starts with physical security. He does USB drops in the parking lot. He watches. So he goes there like days before. He looks at like which employee might be the IT people or people that he can put the USB down. Why do they do that, right? See how many people plug USB into their system. Sometimes USB has scripts. Then he dressed as regular people. He goes and he try to go to see if he can go to the back of the casino where the operation happens, right? So he tells me sometimes it's scary because they got security guards, right? And those security guards means business. So and then him and his team, they do that, and then he would logically go through and assess network and system, and they have a week to do that. So sometimes they give you a contract that stays, sometimes it's hours, sometimes it's weeks. So gathering intelligence is gonna tell him, right? Oh, they have physical issues, right? He can go in without a badge, etc. So if you are gonna go to DEF CON this year, you guys know what DEF CON is? So it's a hacking convention that happens in Vegas at the end of summer. It's usually like July, August. Caesar Palace used to host it, but I think now they're back to Harrah's. I could be wrong. You can find a lot of videos that they post on YouTube about it. When you go there, don't turn on your smartphone and use cash. I'm serious, right? They don't take card payments anyway, so it's roughly about $300 to go. But when you go there, sometimes there are FBI, CIA, and companies go there to recruit people, but they have really cool demonstration. Black Hat is another conference that a lot of professional goes to, and that's tend to be like red team people. The student that I talked about, right? Like he speak and he participate at DEF CON. So if you do go, let me know. I will connect you with him, and that way he can maybe introduce you and network you with people. I went to DEF CON a few times, and they have really cool after party and badges. So the $350 or so is worth your time. So if you want to just pop into Vegas real quick for fun and a little bit of not learning, it's just so hot in the summer, but yeah, it could be a cool event to go to.
Would you still recommend for somebody that has like little experience?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've actually brought students there before when I worked for a school that actually paid for it. Here I tried to do that, but they frown upon cash, bringing cash to pay. That's a problem. So I brought a lot of beginner students, and it really, like, when we were there, they show like ATM attacks. Like there's people that demonstrated. Sometimes they do like auto attacks at car. So you actually see professional that performs these things. And then they have like these little robots crawling around, and it's like sensing Wi-Fi, so it's like brute forcing the keys, and then it feeds back into the laptop. So you see different demos at different time. And Black Hat is like that. So yeah, if you have time and money, I would encourage you to go. It's fun. Just be careful about like using electronics there. Okay. All right. Next, we're gonna describe the difference between active and passive footprinting. You can find the definition also in your notes. So what's the difference between active and passive footprinting? And what kind of tools can you use for each of these areas? So active footprinting is a way that you can gather the information about the target using tool that is directly impacting the target. So for example, if you're using Nmap and you scan the IP address of that target, that's an active footprinting. Okay? Because Nmap is going to tell you what? It's going to tell you what kind of operating system that system is using, what kind of, how far, how many hops between you and that target, what kind of vulnerabilities, what kind of ports are open, right? So that's active footprinting. I'm going to tell you now, when you do active footprinting, if you can see them, they can see you, okay? So if you need to be stealth, then you have to start with passive. And passive sometimes is tedious, and it might not give you the information that you need, right? Because in passive footprinting, you're collecting information about the target through search engine, through social media, maybe through people, or dumpster diving. Dumpster diving has always been around since the 70s, okay? You just go in and look through their trash to see like if they printed documents, if they threw away like drives, etc., so that way you can gather information. It's dirty, but it's helpful, right? So I typically recommend starting with this, right? If you need to be active footprinting, if you have a certain window of time, or if you can bypass certain things so you're not detected, because all systems call home. Okay. So let me ask you this. Some of you already know Wireshark. Like, let's say that if you're using network analyzer like Wireshark, is it passive or is it active? Let's say that I'm in my car with my laptop. I'm attaching to the school network, and I run Wireshark, right? So everybody's on that wireless network. If they're logging into Canvas, if they're accessing their bank account, I see it. I see them. Is it active or passive? Why is it passive? Am I directly scanning the target? No, right? It's kind of like you're standing in the street and you're looking at all the cars go by. That's what network analyzer is. You're like, oh, there's a red car with two people in it. There's a green car with one person in it, right? And that person is wearing, a white t-shirt, right? So that's what the network analyzer does is it tells you all the traffic that's coming through, which system is receiving, which system is sending. Is it completely legal? The legality of this area of the industry is what you do with that information. Okay, that's very important. What we do with that information is to improve our security landscape. That makes it ethical compared to someone who grab a packet, modify the packet, and launch an attack. That's illegal. Okay? So you ask yourself, then why do people become a red team member? Like a red hat. What do you think? So the people who are performing ATM hack, car hack at these conventions, right? They do it so that way they can tell the manufacturer about the car, the issues that they have, like Bluetooth, right? Someone can remotely control the CPU on the car, right? They're doing it for the purpose, the greater good for the industry, right? But is it completely legal? If you read some of the books by professional and famous attacker, they've been to prison, right? Will the FBI pay you big bucks to work for them? Not always the case, okay? But there are opportunities for you to improve something by learning something. But the legality, there's a gray area that we have to think about. Okay, fine. So how can you use a search engine to do so? You can go in and specify your search feature. So I can't just simply search for the information by typing in the text, right? You have to be a little bit more advanced in using operators, with using criteria for your search. That's going to give you specific information. Now you guys have access to AI, right? I've read a lot of articles over the break about generative AI and how they approach it. There's already tons of open source stuff on it using generative AI for certain things, right? Because the industry is very involved in how how we move and how we use the tool. So you have to continuously learn how to use that. Using search engine is a good start. Like Google Dorking is where we put in the criteria. And so the more criteria that you put in, the more specific information it's going to spit out, because that's how the algorithm is designed, right? Okay. Any question? So we're going to use active and passive footprinting techniques today and tools. And so I want to explain this so you know what you're doing, right? Let's say that you're new in your classes and you just started learning security. This can, basic information is important. Okay, I'm going to move 5 down to the next page, okay? And if you miss something, we can go back during the break or at the end of class. You can always watch the video as well. Okay. So when you get information, is it accurate? That's important. You need to ask yourself, is this information useful? Is it accurate? Because not all information is going to give you what you need. So what we need to do is we need to really cross-reference. We need to validate that information. So how do I validate? If I use 2 search engines and get the same result, then it's the same. That's the result, right? It's validated. Now, if you go to social media and it says one thing, but then other sources says another thing, you need to make sure that it aligns so that way you can get what you want. If it's mismatched, it's going to take additional time to really dive a little deeper, drill it down so that way you can get specific information. So you can refer to OSINT. We are going to talk about this. We're going to use it. OSINT tools. Also, there is national or global databases that you can use for cross-referencing. The industry is really great now, right? It wasn't like that before, about documenting tools, right? How effective they are, validating the tools that works, and they share that online. Okay, it's maintained by association and organization of professional who started like you at one point. So when you use OSINT tool, what kind of information can you validate? Domain registration, especially for web servers. Okay. Who does that domain belong to? Right? Like if you're looking at things like Google, Amazon, etc., the IP address, the public IP addresses that are associated with those domains, because all DNS is tied to web servers, and typically they would have more than just those, right? You got email, right? You got authentication servers, etc. So IP addresses. So typically, if you see, I don't know if you ever seen, like at a lot of time, like if you're looking at the firewall logs, or especially like application firewall, web application firewall, let's say that you look at those, you're gonna see that like there's certain attacks that's being blocked. It's gonna first tell you which IP address was trying to target you. Okay. It's gonna say this public IP address from China, right, has been blocked because it attempted this form of attack. So in an effective rule, that's what it's gonna tell you. Okay. How does it know China? Well, because IP address is really degraded into regional area. Okay. You got service provider, it's managed through the service provider, that's how they can tell. Have you guys seen the tech maps? Okay, I'll come back to this. I know some of you seen this because I like to show students or kids this, but okay. If you go to like a search engine and you look attack maps. Let's go to see which one, maybe checkpoint. Or you can also find threat map. This is good when you have good connection. So it's gonna show you the map of the world. This is the amount of attacks that's happening this day, right now. You see that? What do you call that? Distributed denial of service. You see that? Right? How can they tell? And it's listing where it's coming from, where it's going to Germany, Japan, and it also, because of the data that they pull from service provider, they're able to tell you, right? Which country is most impacted? We're always in the top 5. Why? Because the tech and the security is predominantly in the United States, right? But you do see like Latin America, South Africa, Asia, quite a bit. So the activity is just what you see, right? And based on the traffic, right? This is what's accumulated through the traffic. That's how it shows the attack. So they just simulate it to give you this. There's many websites that give you this. Some are better than the other. So they're ranking here, like which one is the top target. You start to see. So when you see a bunch of lines coming across like that, that's distributed. Okay. Or it's coming to that one target. And then you can also like select the country and it gives you like all the malware, the industry that's impacted. Sorry, it's kind of blurry on the projection, but you can open it on your screen. Somebody is, see? There you go. That's a lot of distributed. And this changes throughout too. So why is this industry need people? This is why. Okay? There's always a high demand. It's just, like I said, the initial step to get into it sometimes can be challenging, but you need to prepare yourself for the job. Okay, so that's that. Let me move my. And you can find like other websites as well. A lot of the malware company, they put up websites to show, they research in that. Okay, so when you go through your footprinting steps, what are some of the effective steps? How do you achieve it? So here are some of the basics in the technique. First, you need to gather as much information publicly as possible. What is shared on websites, social media, that kind of information doesn't cost a lot and it's abundant, right? And then you need to cross-reference, like I said before, make sure that your information has quality. That's what we need. And this can be short or long, depends on your target and what's out there. Now, when you need to assess the infrastructure, you would next move into the scanning, right? So we can use Network Analyzer to scan, and that's going to identify a few things. So you can use Nmap, right? Port scanner. It's going to tell you which are the system or the host and the services that's tied to the system. And so if you're not familiar with, well, how can I determine this? Every port is correlated with the service. For example, port 80 is for HTTP, right? The protocol. So 3 components: protocol, port, and the services that provide. So in this field, you must know your ports and your protocol. Because the scanner is going to spit out port number and you're like, oh, I don't know what that is, right? So when you network scan, it's going to tell you who's talking and what kind of services they're running. So if I run a DNS, right, it's going to tell you 53. And so that's going to tell me what? Oh, I can do DNS query to see the kind of records that it has. From a hacker standpoint, once I get the queries, I know which records I want to target, because if you want to redirect, that's the next thing that you're going to do, is you are going to look at the records and counterpoint in those records. Okay. And so when you see a lot of the attack, they do DNS farming, and this comes with phishing, it comes with like a lot of things. So everybody that connects to that website, that DNS, is gonna redirect them to your own server. And then 3, we're gonna analyze the gathered information and look at the weaknesses. So vulnerability is important here, right? The weaknesses from the computer, the host, the servers, the weaknesses from the protocols and the services that are used. So let's say that they are using remote access, there's always issues with that, or Windows, right? SMB has a bunch of weaknesses. So, and because the design and the protocol, it's always, there's some flaw in it, because a lot of the protocols are written from the 70s, right? And they have upgraded from that. One of the ones that you regularly use is for authentication, right? If you type in HTTPS, you log into the website, you're using TLS or sometimes SSL, okay? And that can tell me what? Oh, the form of attack that I'm gonna do next by that service. So what are we gonna get here for the output? So when you footprinting, ultimately you want to report. You want a list of information you want to report. So when you give this to the IT team, let's say that you are an external contractor, or if you work within, you have to derive the report. And from that report, you're going to determine what form of attacks can happen from this, right? Oh, is it denial of service attack? Is it a DNS poisoning or farming? Is it, phishing attack? What is it? And because the weaknesses, which is the vulnerability, it's exploitable. You see a lot of 0-day, and that's a lot of it is software issues, right? Unpatched system, outdated, or sometimes like firmware issues. So, now if you have lots of systems, you have to do a lot of information gathering, and that's just the way it works. Okay, next is the next question. 9. What kind of information can be gathered when you are DNS footprinting? So earlier I mentioned a little bit about DNS. Everybody has a DNS, right? This is how we're going to be able to set up like authentication server, also for the web, right? And public DNS, if you have that DNS, it's tied to an IP. Even if you are hosting through AWS and, so your service provider has a list of IP. They're given that list and then they're going to lease you that IP. So all systems communicate with IP addresses. So that's going to, if you gather information from the DNS, first you start with what kind of public IP addresses do these systems have? Are there subdomain entries? Because in an enterprise, like if you're talking about Walmart, Target, a lot of the Fortune 500, they have structure, right? They have corporate office and then their branches. And then if you're looking at a bank, there's a location, multiple location in larger cities. But all of that information will funnel back to a certain area. Or if they own sisters company, you would see subdomain information. And through that, you would also relate that to mail server. The majority of the companies is going to use MX records tied to the DNS. If you took networking with me, you already seen MX or DNS records like A or for AAA. So Mail Exchange is often Microsoft product, is MX record. And that tells you that they have a mail server, right? And then if they have zone transfer information, so In my lab in 40A, we looked at how we can create primary zone, secondary zone for the DNS. And so if they have zone transfer information, we can do something with that for DNS attack. So if a pen tester can see that, an attacker can see that. That's the point, right? Okay. So then, what kind of tools can you use at the command line? Like I said, right? Command prompt in Linux and PowerShell too can be useful, but PowerShell is more for like configuration and automation. But you can use it for things like, Microsoft certificate kind of technique. So you can do NS lookup, bless you. That's gonna tell you which DNS you're working with. You can also use dig. These are just two, but there are more. There's lots more. So this is going to help you find entry points, and it's going to also uncover subdomains, child domain. Okay, I'm going to try to wrap it up. Let me see how far. Okay, we're probably going to go to like maybe 3 or a little bit after, and then we'll take a break. Any question? Okay, so with that, then we're going to continue with the DNS approach, right? So I just wanted to kind of logically give you like how do we start gathering information for the DNS? Then we are going, once you uncover that information, then what kind of attack can happen or use, right? What type of information can be found when you are performing DNS cache snooping? You guys know what cache is used for, right? It's a buffer area in storage where it would save the information for the system to refer to. So when you're doing DNS cache snooping, you can get information about the domain and the IP address that are recently used. So if you have like forward servers or servers that are tied to the DNS, this can also be useful. Because the system keeps record of that, it keeps the cache, so that way if it's requested again, it can just go to that, so that way it responds quicker. Okay, so if you ever done web scraping, right? Some of you might have, because that's the easiest practice technique for a lot of students. Or even in data analysis, they web scrape because there's a lot of data online. So when you web scrape, you can pull a bunch of information, especially data, and it will not be clean, right? In data analytics, we're like, oh, when we scrape, we're gonna have to like touch it up because you might get a bunch of garbage too. So, but anyways, you can also grab banners. So every server would have information that it holds, okay, about it. So if I have an FTP server, a web server, it would have a banner. Okay, what kind of services that it's running, the port that might be used, but you have to actively pull that. So server operating system is important for us. Software is important for us because the version number. Okay, the version number speaks to vulnerability. If you have, let's say that I have a company and I run old Windows Server, like Windows Server 2016. Why didn't I upgrade? It might not be supported by Microsoft anymore, but because I have applications that was in-house that was written for that server, and now I don't want to pay developer to write new application or updates for it, right? But it still works, so I'm gonna keep it, and that happens in public sector a lot, right? It was funny. I was talking to my husband last night, and then we were talking about like when we first start building our computers and use it, and he was talking about, yeah, I remember. You remember Windows 98? You remember? So I'm like probably most of your parents' age. um, you will remember Windows XP, right? So I went into the field when Windows NT and XP was there, okay? And there was a lot of flaws in these operating system, you know, and the same thing with server operating system. You always have to update it because the software is written for the server to function a certain way, and it's you weight the risks, right? So when they release the software, everything works. You know that, right? And then sometimes down the line, they found the problem. Now Microsoft just released updates. Back in the day, they would have service pack. Okay, so the software version tells you existing vulnerability. And this is when 0-day happens, right? They would know the vulnerability that exists already before it even launched and then attacking. A lot of malware plays on this, software with software, right? Malware ultimately is just code, right? That is intended for malicious intention or malicious activity, like corrupting your file, making, like ransomware, it encrypts, right? So it's software with software. Okay, I talked a little bit about web scraping already. So web scraping, the result for web scraping, so basically you use web scraping tool, it's gonna pull information about the target. It could be an IP, a domain like www dot, a host name. It's gonna pull the information that the web server holds, like web presence. Okay. Companies' products, because usually they have that on their pages. The services that's used or offered by that company. Employees' information. You might see like different level. They might list their executives. You know, the type of employees that they hire. And then organizational structure. Sometimes they'll list their branches, their offices. Like I said, different directors and executives. So that's, but sometimes you can't trust this, right? Data is data. You have to validate it because it might exist on a page, but it's not correlate with other information, then it might not be clean. Okay. So let me view. So don't disregard the notes. So here's web scraping that's on page 3, right? And then next we're going to talk about competitive intelligence. I do list the tools and I link them for you. Maltego, social mention, these are some of the tools that are already been made. And then your website footprinting, it talks about different scanning categories. And I do list some of the common scanner. Okay. If you're working with cloud, you have to use a certain product when you're working with, so there's specific things that you would use, or sometimes they are not open source, sometimes they're proprietary, through a certain company. Rapid7 is highly affiliated with, the databases and tools for attacks. So they do a lot of research in that, so they offer information as well. So you can go through. I will not have time to list all of this. Qualys is through the company, but we will use OpenVAS, and some of the product. So for Tenable, you can sign up for you can register for an account and you can use like their basic version. I'm gonna tell you now, Tenable is a really good tool. It gathers all the connected devices and it lists the vulnerability for those devices. But when you run the scan, what it does is it query the device and wait for the response, right? How good is your network? How fast is the response? It's gonna be a while, hours before you get. So if you have like 50,000 devices, don't expect it to give it to you in an hour, okay? You walk away, go get coffee, dinner, and come back. Okay, I tell that to my forensic students. This is, and a lot of the time we do this on virtual machines. So how much resource are you giving your virtual machine? Your processor, your RAM? So this is when, if you get into this field, you should use powerful system like your top gaming system. Okay. Some of these jobs, when you land the contract or when you get hired, they're gonna tell you to bring your own laptop. Big corporate will give you a laptop, but not all companies will do that. If you're a consultant, you contractor, you're gonna come equipped. I still have the habit now. I only travel with one laptop, and every laptop I buy is a gaming laptop because I might need it for work, and I have like 4 gaming laptops that I use. Okay, so think about that, right? And so on. So I list a bunch of different tools. And then the OWASP, we talk about OWASP. This is specifically for web and web application. Some of the port scanner, the network scanner. These are some of the common ones. You guys probably heard of Metasploit. That comes with Kali Linux, but you can also get it through its own Git repository. Who would use those? Okay. All right. Move on. So for 14, why is competitive intelligence important to an attacker? We talked a little bit about this. I mentioned it a little bit. So competitive intelligence gives you information about the companies based on the job listings, right? Or the responsibility of the technician. So when I look at the job listing, let's say that ABC company is hiring security analysts, and these are the requirements, right? To be able to, work with CM system, analyze the logs. Sometimes it will list specific products or system name or services. That's important for the attacker because then it's going to be like, oh, these are the systems that they use. These are the services that they use. Then I can look into the vulnerability for those things. Okay. I'm going to move 13 down because some of you might be looking at that still. And then I know some of you are working ahead. Okay, so when you take certifications, they love giving you case scenario. As you move on to higher, more advanced certification, the scenario and the answers get close. So the answers are very close and the scenario gets harder, right? They really want you to show that you know. So we will go through these scenarios together. So look at the below scenario. We're going to identify the type of social media footprinting for each. A company is searching social media to find education information on job applicant. This is considered a profile analysis. Okay. So let's say that I have Nike, right? Their recruiters is going through LinkedIn to look for people who have a bachelor degree in computer science or cybersecurity. That's considered profiling. So it's profile analysis. B, an attacker is examining the CEO's posted images videos and social media website, and that's a content analysis. Nowadays, you have to be really careful about the video that you post because it has your voice sample, right? You only need about 30 seconds of someone's voice for deepfake. So, and also the images. You know, say it again.
I would have asked.
Say it again.
I would have asked.
How advanced is it? It's pretty good. I mean, some tools, it's less of a sample. Some tools require a couple weeks. But if you have people who post vlogs, you know, it's like 10 minutes video.
Right.
I know I'm on YouTube, right? So, but ultimately, you can just take a clean, it has to be a clean sample. So AI can generate that based on your sample. It does images really well too, but on the data sets, what we can do is we can use a tool to look at the glitch in the image. So AI generated image, as you can see, it analyzed the pixel, the complexity of the color, all of those things to really tell you whether it's real or it's not real, right? So they do have tools against that, but you know, then that's just extra things that you're gonna have to analyze, right? So when you do content analysis, you're really examining on what they post, what kind of things they say, the content within the video, right? Or the actual image. Who's in the picture? Are there co-workers? You know, things like that. And then C, an investigator is examining the individual social media comments to determine their emotional state, and that this is considered sentiment analysis or it's also content analysis because you're looking at the text content on the comment, or maybe it might be a video comment or whatever. Now, if you guys are going for the Department of Defense or military contract-based type of work, government contract-based type of work, just limit your social media, right? Clean up your social media because they do ask you to give up your credentials so they can check. They also publicly show. They also sometimes look into service provider to see if you illegally download. The CIA does that. So the FBI. You know, I have a cousin that works for the FBI. Now he works for OpenAI, right? And they treat him really well. It's such a cool job. But anyway, so the process in getting hired, you know, especially with top clearance, is tedious. They also want people to vouch for you. So if you're posting, you know, videos of you hanging out with your friends drinking at the bar, you got to be careful about that because when they interview me for background for people like my former students, they usually ask about that. Right? They usually ask if you have alcohol problem, drug problem, gambling problem, financial problem, etc. So if you want to get those type of jobs, which are also abundant, and I'll show you the internship opportunities, you just gotta be mindful about what you share. Okay. So starting in security, if you're learning security, just be more private with your information. Okay. So 16, why is website footprinting important in ethical hacking? We can understand website structure, like servers that are hosting the web, if they're using cloud, you know, or a host provider, and then the components in the site. Because that's gonna tell you the weaknesses. So usually if you ever like try to get a domain up and host it, you can pay a certain fee for just like a static page with no security. Very cheap. Right? You know, if you see those advertisements like $1 a month. So it's very basic. If you have interaction in your website, like logging in, a user putting in form information, like filling out a form and submitting, you should implement some security. Every website now is HTTPS, so it has security protocols that's implemented, but the design in the website can tell you about the flaws. the web app that runs on that website can be flawed, right? So we would see the security gaps and be able to close the gaps, and that's our job. And so if you look at my long list of scanners, right, you can go through, you don't have to put down the one I put, you can pick others. The scans in the second phase of attack is when you actually, finding specific technical information for attacks. So we talk about active and passive, right? Same thing with scanners. If the scanner is using the IP address of that target, likely that target is going to see your scanner. So in vulnerability scanning, you can use things like Nessus, which I mentioned, that's from Tenable. The license for Tenable for professional, it's like $2,000 and up. So if you work for a company that has the license, you can use it. Do not, I'm going to say it again, do not use pirated software ever for your job. You will get fired instantly. Okay? Whether you're a technician or specialist, do not use it. Right? If you don't have the license, tell your supervisor or look for open source one. Now you gotta remember what Creative Commons and open source license is that when you use it for educational purposes, freebie, that's great. Okay? But when you use it for a for-profit company, you have to ask their permission because it becomes a legality issue. So make sure you contact the creator and then ask them. Usually they let you, right? Work Suite, we're gonna use this. I encourage you to learn this very well because the industry likes this. Okay? This is a good tool to learn. So we're gonna have a lab on it. We have many things with Nmap. So if you want port scanning, Nmap is a common one. They have really good documentation on their website. Okay, you can also run a script with it. These are Python tools, so if you look at Python, it will be great. Okay, Unicorn Scan, Angry IP Scanner, and then for the network analyzer, you can use Wireshark, OpenVAS, ZMap. T-Shark is the command line version of Wireshark, right? Wireshark is now equipped in Kali. You can install it on Mac. You can install it on Windows. I know a lot of my students prefer to use MacBook, right? But in the security world, we use Linux and Windows a lot. So you can run the virtual machine on your Mac. Okay, we're coming to the end now. I'm sorry it's long. So how can an attacker gain unauthorized access to the system, networks, and web application? So in the next stage is they need to have access to launch the attack, right? A lot of times either they move laterally, they go from system to system. If they're coming in from the outside, like let's say I'm gonna go through, these different servers to get into your network, then if it's not detected, they have to cover their track as they do that, right? So what happens is if you're not monitoring your network, then they're going to be able to enter. Many of these cases that you see the big attack, the big breach, they go undetected for a while, okay? That's how they're able to accumulate so much data because most company, if you're looking at an enterprise, they don't just have one database, they have many databases, okay? And so they need to be able to navigate to it. Sometimes use a user account that can have that privilege or access an account and escalate the privilege, right? Be able to change how they can access. And then once, in order to gain unauthorized access, there's exploitation kits that are available. These are, so when we say toolkits, these have like many components to it. So that way they can go through, like Metasploit is a common one, right? They can also use social engineering, like a phishing to get an executive to to give them an account information, and then backdoor. With backdoor, I think a lot of the times now our NPS is your network prevention system, it sees this a lot. We block a lot of script. So backdoor usually happens is when they can add a script to something or launch it, and then it basically allows them to be able to access a certain port to come back to it. So if you are monitoring and if you are using your security appliances accordingly, which is not always the case, because otherwise I would not be teaching this and you will not be looking for work in this, right? But in a lot of the scenarios now we are doing a little bit better with backdoor. Okay, any question? Okay, I'll stop the video, take quick attendance. We can start on the lab after you take a short break, right? And then, let me not be on record when I say this.